Welcome to Satsang. As you know, you're welcome to pose whatever question you have by simply speaking your question or by writing it in the chat box. So the topic, so to speak, of this meeting is living as awareness, living as consciousness. On one hand, what one could say that is the simplest way of living. Like the sun shines, like the rain falls on the ground and the seed sprouts and grows. There is a certain simplicity to this unfolding. Like the breeze gently moves the leaves and sways the blades of grass. There is a certain simplicity and gracefulness to this unfolding. And yet it is quite magical and quite wondrous, mind-blowing. The cycle of day and night, the weather. Such a flow. Problem-free, easy, simple, graceful. In a way, living as consciousness is similar. It expresses that same simplicity and ease, trouble-free, concern-free. Effortless. Like the perfume of a rose or the perfume of the orange blossoms fill the orchard. Similarly, the living as consciousness exudes the perfume of peace, love, beauty. But as a separate self. When you separate yourself, when you consider yourself, and when you identify yourself as someone, no matter how great this someone that you have identified with is, it's still limited. And this someone, like all objects, like all forms, is limited and changing, and is subject to the conditions, various conditions, family, culture, economic situation, interactions, various types of interactions, the health of the body. No matter how great this someone that you identify with, it's still limited and incomplete and bound to deteriorate. And this identification sheds a shadow, a dark shadow, ongoing shadow, upon the simplicity of being and the ease. It spoils the happiness. Confuses you in believing and feeling that you are somebody and with this somebody there are all sorts of issues, like all bodies. They have issues. And when you confuse yourself to be somebody, you assume the issues of this body. You believe them to be yours and you feel they are yours. And one day you are happy because all is well. But the next day, somebody may talk to you the wrong way, or something may occur in the environment or at the body-mind level. And then you are not feeling too good. This identification is a shadow, a veil upon the simplicity, the gracefulness, and the ease of being that is inherent to consciousness. So although living as consciousness, as awareness, is effortless, is simple and graceful, first you need to inquire deeply into your belief and your feeling that you're a man, a woman, a person, that you're a mother, a father, a teacher, a person. A son, a daughter. You need to free yourself from the belief and feeling that you have a certain age, that you live as a body, mind, as a person in a certain town or a certain city or a certain house or a certain village. That you are the body. You need to free yourself from the belief that when the body is hungry, you are hungry. But when the body is tired, you are tired. This requires a certain type of inquiry that is sustained, that is serious, that has within it a passion for truth and the recognition of the truth that of course no one can do for you. No one can recognize on your behalf. It is your business, your primary business. To come to that deep understanding, the understanding that frees you from the past, that liberates you from the future and from the memory, from thought, that allows you to recognize the formless self that is the reality of consciousness that right now, although formless and invisible, is undeniable and perceives this perception. What a wonder, isn't it? The wonder of awareness. So living as consciousness, as awareness, is like the sun shining on the surface of the stream or the surface of the pond when the clouds have dissolved, when the clouds are no longer in the way. So one could say that your task is to look at this unhappy download of being somebody, of being a mother or a father, of being a person. To look at that and wonder, is that true? How real is that? Am I what thought says I am? Am I what memory, what images arise to me? Am I in any way defined by the feelings that arise, that I perceive? What is this person that arises in thought? Am I this imagined, perceived person that is somehow within thought, within feelings? So you need to look into these questions deeply within yourself to come to clarity over and over without judging yourself about how good you are doing. Fresh moment every moment. Brand new moment of awareness, consciousness, inquiry, looking, listening openly, not knowing, listening, not knowing, and wondering. What defines the self? What defines awareness? Can anything else but awareness define, represent awareness? Can anything else besides awareness express awareness? Am I not? In spite of images and thoughts, am I not the light of awareness? The screen. Formless, borderless. Can we live with the heart of this contemplation as our guide? The other option is to follow thoughts and feelings, world events, thoughts and feelings to guide us. And that's pretty confusing and miserable. isn't it? We know that, right? We do. The me and the her and us and them and him and her, thoughts and images, and behind all of it is me, this image, this person, this so-called imagined entity. Am I an entity? Is awareness an entity? Is there anything that can describe awareness outside of awareness itself, which is indescribable, wordless, direct knowingness, your direct intuition, your knowingness that I am that. There are no words for it. It doesn't need words. What for? Words are helpful to describe a tree, a bird. So you get inspiration from your contemplation of awareness that is formless, more of an absence, not a leaning forward, but an open beingness. You recognize that. You recognize the transparency, the reality that perceives. You contemplate the formless reality of awareness. You trust this guidance. You trust this light. Being watchful of the I thought that arises about me tomorrow and all the negative emotions that come with that. The negative emotions are the canary in the coal mine. They are a warning signal that at that moment you are identified with the old download of being a person, of being a mother or a father or son or a daughter, somebody, an employee, an employer, somebody, an American, a Chinese, a Christian, a Muslim. You're identified. And identification is core of ignorance, the major error in our thinking and in our living. Anyways, I welcome whatever questions you may have. I have a question here from Anne. I will go over it in a minute.
Hi, Meg.
Hello, Esther.
When someone says, I am not the doer, who is speaking?
I am not, so repeat that.
When someone says, I am not the doer, who exactly is speaking?
So In your question, when someone says, I am not the doer, who is speaking, there is already an assumption. The assumption is that there is someone who is speaking. When someone is speaking and says, I am not the doer, who is speaking? So in your question, there is the assumption that there is someone speaking. So we need to look at that assumption. So right now, in this very moment, there is, let's say, hearing. Or if we are speaking, we can say there is speaking. But it may not sound acceptable to the mind, but at the moment of speaking, there is no one speaking, there is no speaking, and there is no time, you see. For speaking to occur, there has to be a certain time. Yes? Would you agree with that?
Yes, Magdi.
Okay. So for speaking, there has to be a certain time. Person starts speaking, says blah, 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 ends speaking, and they spoke this. So speaking, for speaking to occur, we need time. So then we look at, okay, well, let's look at time. So we can look at time by going to our thinking. Say, oh, well, I know time is sunrise and sunset, and between the sun rising and sun setting is time. Or we can go to our direct experience of time in this very moment. When we go to our direct experience in this very moment, we don't find time. We only find awareness. We don't experience two different moments in time. We don't experience that. We only experience awareness. In order to experience time, you have to experience A and B, and the A and B have to be separate, and there has to be something between A and B. But that's not our experience. We're not experiencing A and B. In our experience, we are not experiencing before and after. We're always experiencing awareness. So when you look at, in your question, when the person is speaking, and you look at what we're just sharing right now in our contemplation, you may realize that there is an assumption in your question. The assumption is that there is time, there is an actual thing called time, and therefore, within that actual thing called time, there is somebody who is speaking. And therefore, your question is, if somebody is saying there is no doer, who is it that is speaking? Your whole question is starting from a false assumption. And if we don't look at the false assumption, and we accept your question as a real question, then the answer will be a false answer. Because it will be an answer that is sort of based on a false assumption. But when the answer is pointing to the false assumption, then the answer is going seemingly not to the question, but in fact it is going to the core of the question. So having said all that, in your question, when someone says there is no doer, who is it that is speaking? I would reply to you that there is no one who said anything. But you can understand me saying there is no one who said anything because I've pointed to the false assumption in your question. Are you following?
Yes, Magdi. What does that mean exactly then?
What does what mean?
You hear that sentence all the time, not to be the doer. What does that mean?
The sentence, don't be I am not the doer?
Yeah. What does that mean?
Yes. When there is an identification, when there is meaning the belief and the feeling, whichever way we have inherited that or whichever way it has developed, when there is the belief and the feeling that I am a person, that I'm this person, this woman, this man, it is like you put on purple glasses and everything for you now is purple. Your reality, your experience is altered by that belief, by that identification. You perceive yourself and you experience yourself as a separate self, as a person, of course, who is now separate from the world and who has to sort of survive and strive and live in the world to safeguard themselves and to better themselves, whatever. And so you have the impression that as a person, I have certain choices to make in order to make sure that this person has a good life, is safe. And that's how you live. You live with the belief and the feeling that I have to make certain choices, I have to make the right choices, and with the belief and feeling that I am making certain good choices and I've made some bad choices, or I'm making some bad choices, and hopefully I will make some good choices. But at some time, there's a shift within your life, and this shift invites you to look at whether, in fact, I am this person that I imagine myself to be, that I feel I am, or am I the reality, whatever that reality is, which we call consciousness or we call I, that truly perceives this perception in this very moment. What am I truly? And when that contemplation arises in your life, you will get a certain glimpse or glimpses that in fact the person that you thought you were was just an imaginary person made out of images and thoughts and feelings. And once you have that understanding, you can start to realize and contemplate and even maybe explore that I am not the doer as this separate self, as this imaginary person. I am not the doer. Thank you, Taha. Pearlie, I got your question. I'll come to it in just a minute. So the meaning of I am not the doer is I am not the doer as a separate self, as an imaginary person, as an imaginary entity, as a bundle of thoughts and images. That is not the doer. The true doer is not some imaginary character. One could say that the true doer is consciousness. What, if we want to speak in these terms, in other words, when we are speaking about doership, we could say that consciousness is the only doer. But to be more pure in our expression, the whole concept of doing, the verb to do, assumes a subject and an object. Yes, you follow? There is somebody doing something within the verb, the language of doing assumes an object and a subject. I am doing this and that. Right? But consciousness is not separate. There isn't a consciousness, awareness, and the world. So that consciousness has to do something in the world. The world is not separate from consciousness. That may be a question that we can go into also, but for now, except if somebody raises a question, I'm going to assume that there is some understanding of that. That the world is not separate from consciousness. What you call the world is not separate from consciousness. The tree is not separate from you. The thought is not separate from you. The sensation is not separate from you. So the whole concept of doership doesn't stand on firm ground. So that is the meaning of there is no doer.
That clears it up, Magdi. Thanks.
Okay, Esther. Perle, you're right. Perle, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. That's on YouTube. A question from YouTube. Maybe when speaking, timelessness is in this experience. Yes, you could say that when speaking, eternity is speaking, or eternity or timelessness is in this experience. Yeah, you could say that. Then you ask, how can I know this, but I'm unable to know how? How can I know this, but I'm unable to know how? Perle, as I was sharing earlier with Esther, activity, in this case speaking, or any activity, requires time. You need to contemplate what I'm sharing with you. You need to look at it. That any activity requires time. A doer, a doing, and a done. A subject and an object. Any activity requires time and space. But if you look at your experience, and you need to look closely, you will not find time. You may feel, you may think there is time, you may feel there is time, but in fact, in your direct experience, irrespective of the thoughts that are arising and the feelings that are arising, there is just consciousness, the reality of consciousness. Zero time, which we refer to as eternity of being, the eternity of awareness, the eternity of being awareness. If you look at that closely, you will come to the understanding that the whole concept of activity in itself, within itself, is flawed. Consciousness is not in the realm of activity or non-activity. It is the reality, the one reality, the reality of being. Simply come to that contemplation, come to that understanding. Keep contemplating what I'm sharing with you until you come to a certainty within yourself of the significance of this pointer. It will answer your question. That would be the satisfying answer to your question. Okay. Anne, you sent me this question, and
yes, hello.
Hello, Anne. So you say it's becoming much more evident to know and experience real self as transparent absence, abundant space, and love. No separation. That's very nice, very beautiful. However,
had to be honest.
However, this is not yet stable and consistent, and seems to take time and trust, as there are still challenging, deep-rooted beliefs and thoughts arising. Okay. Also, because I'm so much happier than I've ever been, I'm starting to enjoy good thoughts and memories but I try not to entertain them, as this may lead me away from the true self. You can enjoy good thoughts and memories without attaching yourself to them, without looking for them or seeking them, without wishing for them to arise so that you can feel better or that you can fill a certain emptiness. But when good thoughts and memories arise and you enjoy them without using them for any personal reasons, that's wonderful, not a problem. I'm going to continue with what you're saying. So there is a little effort, there is still some effort, and even discipline, it seems, to turn my attention back to presence. Is that correct? Yes. It is correct to apply effort and discipline to turn your attention back to presence, back to consciousness, back to the source, back to the transparency of being, back to the reality that right now perceives this perception.
Yes.
Keep turning your attention over and over to the reality, the formless, invisible transparency that is, although it is non-phenomenal, although it is not visible to the senses, it is the light of being, it is the transparency of being, the awareness, presence, awareness, the aware presence that I am. I refers to this aware presence. Yes? Keep turning your attention to that. Don't worry, effort and discipline. This is good effort and good discipline, yes? I continue with what you wrote, Anna.
Yes.
Could you explain, John, when you get on board, see if you can mute yourself. I know you're having, looks like you're having a hard time getting back and forth on. So you're right, Anne. Could you explain more in depth about what the mind sinking into the heart and that there is only one reality? Does this take time? And is there anything that will help this process other than abiding in presence and contemplation? The mind sinking into the heart refers to in the recognition of the reality of consciousness. It's absolute reality. The mind becomes so still that it no longer arises out of that knowingness. It will flutter for a while as it's getting more and more into that recognition. And at some point, it dissolves in that recognition.
Yes.
That is the significance of the mind sinking into the heart, and that there is only one reality. Well, how could there be any other reality than one reality? If there was another reality, what would know it? There are 2 realities or 5 realities. There's something that knows that there are 2 or 5 or 7 or 8 realities. And whatever it is that knows that there are 8 realities is that one reality. Like Francis Lucide used to say, the buck has to stop somewhere. So it stops at one reality. You can take it up as far as you want, but eventually it has to come to one reality. And also intuitively, we know that there is one reality. And experientially, we know there is one reality because we never experience any other awareness but awareness. We never experience non-awareness. How could we experience non-awareness? If we're experiencing non-awareness, what would experience that if not awareness?
Yeah,
Awareness
of course,
cannot
yeah.
experience. Awareness cannot experience non-awareness. That's an oxymoron. So only awareness is, it knows itself. It experiences everything as itself. It knows the world, body, mind that arises out of itself, out of its creativity and its freedom. And it knows itself independent of the world, body, mind. It knows itself directly as I. I know I know I am. I know I am aware. I know I am awareness. I know awareness is aware, and I am that. A direct knowingness that bypasses the body-mind.
And just, can I just ask you, Magdi,
Yeah.
I've heard some teachers say that when you're having glimpses or seeing clearly, the mind will resist that. And I feel I'm experiencing that a little bit, that
Yeah.
the stronger sort of glimpses I'm having, the mind comes in quite strongly as well.
Like when there is a candle that's lit and there is or you open the window and there is the wind that comes in, the candle doesn't go off right. Well, sometimes it goes off right away, but often it flickers and for a little while, but it is bound to. Yes, so there is a certain resistance, but who cares? Because we're more interested. Our passion is for truth. We don't give a hoot about the resistance. We're fascinated by truth. That's our passion. That's what interests us.
Yeah.
And we know that there is a reality of consciousness, and that is like the mega trump card. It's right there. Awareness is. We know awareness as I am that. That revelation came to us, and we awoke to that. That yes, there is awareness, and I am this awareness, and everything that appears secondary to awareness. Without awareness, what would be this perception? What would be the sensation? What would be this mentation if there wasn't awareness? What would it be? What's the thought without awareness? So yes, there is resistance, but who cares? I have received God's message. I've opened the envelope and I've read the invitation, and it's saying, come to the castle. Anytime you want, the door is open. You can come now. And I say, yeah, I'm on. I'm game.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
So yeah, resistance, okay, no big deal.
Okay.
So we experience some resistance, we experience the weather, but what we have available to us is consciousness. You can always, or keep turning your attention to consciousness. Consciousness turning its attention to itself over and over, not to thoughts and perceptions and feelings and meditations about tomorrow and yesterday, and he did this and she did that, and he got enlightened yesterday and will not be enlightened tomorrow. No. All that is, it's like birds, flying, passing by in the sky. Okay.
Well, it's more resistance of thoughts saying, "Oh, it's all in your imagination, and just things like that. Thoughts just questioning the reality of
Yes,
consciousness and
but
things.
thought doesn't know you. You know thought. Thought
Yeah,
doesn't know you.
exactly.
When
Yeah.
thought says, "Oh, you are just dreaming about
Mm,
consciousness. You're dreaming it." How? What is? I mean, how can thought know anything about what I'm dreaming? What? How can
mm,
thought know anything? Thought is known,
mm,
right? Like you
exactly. Yeah.
perceive these glasses. This is,
Mm,
these glasses don't know anything.
mm,
Thought is a subtle form. It's a form. It's an object. It's a
yes.
subtle object. This is a gross object.
Mm, yeah.
Thought is a subtle object.
Definitely.
No
Yeah.
difference. No difference.
Yeah. And when I put it into perspective, anyway, the sort of pain that I've been through in the last few years compared to this resistance I'm getting now, what's happening now is nothing really.
Yes.
It's nothing.
Yes. All that the past dissolves in our
Mm,
contemplation when we come more and more to clarity that I
mm,
am the transparency of being. It's amazing the power of this awakening.
yeah. The
It
past does seem
dissolves
irrelevant.
the entire karmic realm comes
Mm,
to an end. It is said that for a sage there is no karma. It's the end of the karma.
yeah.
The millenniums of karma, of karmic realms come to an end.
Mm, amazing. Really amazing. That's lovely. Thank you, Magdi.
Okay, okay. Thank you for your question.
Hi, Magdi.
Hello, Holly.
Hi there.
Yes.
So, my question has to do with being a truth lover, and you use that phrase often. And I feel like when I reflect on my motivations, that it's more about ending suffering, um, and I'm happy to see that that seems to correspond with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Is there any advantage to phrasing it in that way as a truth
Mm-hmm.
lover as opposed to an end of suffering lover or
Mm-hmm.
a happiness lover?
Yes. Yes. Oh. uh, our interest, let's say, in ending the suffering and our interest in awakening from the illusion of separation, meaning awakening to truth, uh, are related, they're connected. The unhappiness and suffering that we experience is what sort of ignites not only that, but among the things that ignites our interest in looking, in contemplating, in wondering, in questioning, in fact, we all 7 billion of us want to end our suffering, and it's a good thing. But majority are working hard, very hard on ending their suffering by building But by pursuing objects, by pursuing experiences, by pursuing relationships, by pursuing, I don't know, better homes, better bodies, better diet, better situation. Better thoughts. But it doesn't do it. It doesn't get us free from the suffering. But that's what we're trying to do. Even when we are trying to amass a lot of money or get very powerful in the politics, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be happy, and we think that we can overlook our suffering by filling the pot with happy things, happy experiences, and happy events. We travel, we do all sorts of things. We're trying to fill the pot with happy things so we are happy. But the pot has no bottom. It's a bottomless pot. Because there is no pot. And at some point, some of us, sooner or later, we come upon the Dharma, the teaching. Somehow, it's grace, you know. We hear something, we read something, we meet someone, and we don't know how, where we hear something that we find ourselves interested in. We may hear that we suffer because we imagine ourselves to be a separate self. Well, and that may interest us. Or we may just meet somebody that we feel the peace around them. It may interest us. Gee, how come this person seems to be different? And one thing leads to the other. We find ourselves, although we started, we may still be interested in ending our suffering, we start to realize that, oh, gee, we hear that suffering is illusion. But it's a different, you know, it's not enough to hear it, suffering is illusion because I'm still suffering. No, there is a whole body of teaching that gets you to understand. And that's the key thing. You come to a certain understanding within yourself. It's your own understanding about suffering. You start to see it and experience the whole process of suffering. You hear that as long as you are a person, as long as you feel and believe and you're a person, you're not contemplating what am I truly, that download just remains on board. It keeps arising. I'm this person, I'm that person, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person, I'm a better person. The suffering continues. You find yourself, it's inevitable, interested in, is this, how can I get a better hold of what I'm hearing? How can I understand that? How can I want to get it. In time, it's inevitable. There is no way to get to the truth without loving it.
Mm.
But it's part of the path to want to bring an end to your suffering. That's why many teachers say suffering is not such a bad thing. It has its function, you see.
Yeah.
The Buddha also talked about suffering, going beyond suffering. But suffering is part of the, but it's a small part of it. You can't stay with wanting to bring an end to your suffering because you still remain as a separate self, as a person that wants to bring an end to their suffering.
Mm.
You have to get beyond that. You have to go to the contemplation of that what I truly am is not a suffering person. See, in your night dream, when you are dreaming that you are losing, I don't know, your wealth, your relationships, your health, you're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, you're in bed dreaming these dreams. You're not this person you're not this person you are dreaming that you are, that is losing their health and their wealth and their relationships. You are consciousness, you are this very moment, the reality, whatever that is, that perceives this perception, that hears these words. And that is not a dream character. That has no gender, no. It's not 5 foot tall, 5'6" tall. It has no weight, no height, no age, no form. The reality of consciousness. You are this reality, you are that. I refers to consciousness, doesn't refer to a man or a woman. The body is a male, female, whatever the body is. But I doesn't refer to the body. I refers to consciousness. And consciousness doesn't suffer. How can consciousness suffer? It's formless, it's non-phenomenal.
Mm.
And you cannot deny consciousness. How could you deny consciousness? Once you may be aloof to it, or you may not have contemplated consciousness. But once you do and you realize, yeah, I is awareness, you can't deny it, right?
Yeah.
There is no other I. There's just I awareness, you see? And where it has no beginning, no ending, it's not tall or short or thick or thin or wide or narrow, right? But you cannot deny it. It's absolute. It's a reality. It's reality because everything comes and goes, but consciousness, awareness never comes and goes. How have you ever experienced no awareness?
No.
Never. You've experienced no body. In deep sleep every night we experience no body. But we never experience no awareness. We experience no mind, no thoughts. We experience no memory. So the contemplation may start with an interest in ending of suffering, which makes perfect sense to me. And it will lead you beyond that personal interest. It will lead you to truth. It will lead you to the pathless path. as long as there is the separate self-identity, there's bound to be suffering.
Mm.
It's the me feeling. So we invite all what arises. The body, the mind, the subtle and the gross, to expand and dissolve in the space. The space of awareness. The very subtle vibrations in the body, the belly, in the legs, in the shoulders, in the face, in the neck. We invite them to expand and dissolve in the space. We remain open. We open our body. We open the back of our body, the front of our body. We expand it. Infinitely, in all directions. Keep expanding it. No holding on. No need to figure things out. No need to fix anything. It's dissolved in the space. Relax your body. Whatever contraction there are in the body, just allow them to dissolve in the space. Expand, allow the body to expand. Any questions?
Magdi?
Yes.
So, sorry, are you getting an echo?
Yes. No, Zoe, yes?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so with this conversation about the no doer and activity requiring time and space, but there's no time and space. So I was contemplating, this is something that has come up from time to time as I practice my drum and seem to see improvement in the way that I play it, and thinking about musicians. But in reality, it's just a magic show because every moment is fresh and new. So there's no connection to something improving. Am I making sense with this?
So when you are practicing the violin, initially you are a beginner and all the notes are off. It's not harmonious. And in time, after some practice, there is an improvement. There is a melody and a harmony and less notes are off. So you could say there is an improvement. This improvement applies to the playing of the violin and the skills that are improving. So it's like you're a dream character traveling towards California from the East Coast. And you heading west and you eventually reach Colorado and you cross the Rockies. You're getting closer to the West Coast. You're getting closer to California. So that applies to the mind level, in the waking dream, and even in our night dream. And we could say that the improvement in playing the violin required 6 months of training, for example, from January to June or whatever. And that's true at the mind level. But when you look at what is January, what is June, not from the perspective of the mind, from the perspective of reality, you come to consciousness. The naming, the labeling, the measuring, the characterizing, all of that is at the mind level, and it holds, it has its order and its place at the mind level. But in the contemplation of reality, we are not contemplating the mind. We understand that at the mind level, there is the 12th century, the 13th century, the 20th century, etc. We believe, we agree and we accept that at the mind level there is Africa and Asia, and that's not an issue. But when we are contemplating truth, it's a different contemplation. We are trying to awaken to truth. We're not trying to fix the mind or cure the mind or correct the mind or correct our dreams. One could say that we are trying to get rid of suffering. I mean, and it's part of it. It's just a side effect. So that the dreams become sweet dreams, but that's not our purpose. We may start initially being inspired by that, like Holly was saying, but it goes beyond that. So in our inquiry, in our contemplation, we're contemplating what is the reality of our experience. And so we look at time from, not from how we're measuring time and how we have determined time at the mind level, but from the reality perspective. And from the reality perspective, there is no two events experienced. There is only consciousness experienced. Only consciousness. And therefore, there is no activity and no improvement. But consciousness can, let's say, dream infinite activities and infinite improvements and infinite destructions. It can dream a little child that doesn't know how to play the violin and becomes a great violinist and improves greatly. And it can dream that great violinist getting Alzheimer and not knowing how to play what is that?
Marianne William?
We don't know how to play that. I want to know how, we know how to play that. So one could say that the freedom of consciousness is expressed in its dreams, but it's inherent within consciousness. Consciousness is free within itself. It is freedom itself. And it's free to create or not. Consciousness isn't determined by its creation and in its creativity. It's determined within itself. It is whole and complete within itself. But yes, as you said, there can be improvements, and there are improvements at the mind level in all sorts of fields, and there are also deterioration in all sorts of fields. I mean, look at how human beings are dealing with each other. It's pretty grotesque.
And that's all the mind level too. That's inherent. Yes. It has to improve and deteriorate.
Absolutely. It is at the world body mind level. And it's been like that forever. I mean, there are people who speak of we're coming to a new age of rising consciousness, or I don't know what. I don't buy any of that. That's just mind.
Yeah.
Just stories. The fact is that when mind is separate, when there is separation, when there is ignorance, there is suffering and misery across the board. Why would it not be across the board? it's there. The virus is there within our perception. It's like you put on purple glasses, everything you look at, it's going to be purple. It's going to be tainted purple.
Mm.
So as long as there is identification, and there is identification, who could say that there is, lesser identification today than 20,000 years ago? What sort of, that's nonsense. And who cares?
Mm.
Who cares?
Huh.
What really matters is what's going on right now. Am I awakening to truth or not?
Oh.
Am I still living the me and her, me and him, and me in the past and me in the future? Is this my experience? Or am I awakening from this dream? Am I awakening to the self? Am I seeing through the belief structures that have been haunting me in my waking and in my night dreams? Am I coming to the transparency of being? Am I experiencing more and more frequently and for longer periods of time the peace of being, the transparency of being? Or did I have a taste 20 years ago and I hope I'll have another taste another 30 years before I croak? Croak? So we look right here, right now, you see. What is the reality of this experience right now? Is it not awareness? Go directly to that. Go directly to the transparency, the reality that it perceives. It's invisible, but it is.
Mm.
The true I am.
Thank you, Magdi.
Okay, Zoe. Okay, well, thank you all. Very lovely to be with you. Thank you for your friendship and your love for truth.
Namaste.
Namaste. And your love for ending suffering. See you soon.
Thank you, Magdi.
Okay. Namaste. Okay.
Namaste.